And in and around Davos. I know it's pretty chilly, but lots of activity, I'm sure, taking place right now. Nompu?
Yes, that's right, Peter. It's a hive of activity at the moment. It's day 2 of WEF 2017, and there's been a lot of discussion going on. You know, it's a place where people are dialoguing about various issues that are affecting them, particularly issues that seem to be common across the globe, issues of globalization, the changes in technology, and so on. Today we had some panel discussions where the IMF MD Christine Lagarde was involved. She was talking about gender issues. So women and men were talking about the gender disparities that continue right across the globe. Women in the same job, same executive job as a man, still get a raw deal and so on, and even in lower level jobs. So talking about those kinds of issues and obviously how to overcome that, how to ensure that equality becomes more of a real proposition rather than just something that people...
All right, okay, it looks like we've dropped us. In fact, she's back. Nompu, let's talk to you once again. And if you can hear me, we've been seeing in the last couple of days images of the likes of the Reserve Bank Governor, the Finance Minister, and I'm just wondering if the South African story is finding its way through these deliberations, especially given that there's so much to talk about. Is South Africa able to tell its story?
Well, they're certainly very able and articulate people on the Team SA team. And you mentioned the Reserve Bank Governor and Finance Minister, and you've got key heavyweights from the corporate world as well. You've got people from civil society and from unions as well. So, and these are not people who are not unfamiliar with coming out to the rest of the world and trying to communicate the South African case. So I don't think that there's any trouble in communicating their case. But remember, everyone around the globe is here, and so it's a competitive environment. So I guess it's about who articulates themselves the best. And also, you know, in terms of foreigners who are looking to invest in South Africa or any other emerging market, it's about whether they believe in the value proposition of South Africa right now. Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa was talking about how our story in 2017 looks a lot better than it did at the beginning of 2016. And I suppose one could really agree with that because, I mean, if you look at things like the Rand, which is an indicator, which is a barometer of how we're doing vis-a-vis the rest of the world, that's improved quite substantially. And we had minimal strike action and so on during 2016 relative to previous years. There's a movement towards ensuring that there's a minimum wage, even though some players are obviously not satisfied with the level that's been spoken about. But there are efforts in play to try and ensure that the environment in South Africa is a lot better and a lot more conducive to investment. There's still outstanding matters. The minerals bill, that remains a big question mark. That needs to be resolved. Otherwise, people who are interested in investing in the mineral sector in South Africa just won't bother because there's so much uncertainty. And then there's the FICA bill as well. That needs to be signed off. If it's not signed off, again, it creates more uncertainty. Which is unfortunate given the fact that South Africa's financial system is actually held in very high esteem.
Have you been able to get a sense of what kind of areas international business is interested in? I mean, traditionally we talk about commodities, really, don't we? Are there any other areas, technology maybe, that South Africa is of interest to the international community there?
Well, that's a very interesting question, Peter. I haven't really engaged with that many foreign investors, but certainly I know that South Africa wants to move away from this narrative of us just being a commodities-based country. Some of the delegates that I was speaking to from South Africa were talking about how we're actually very good in the area of technology. You've got real innovators in South Africa. Cape Town, for example, is seen as a sort of hub similar to Silicon Valley in California. California. And so you've got real talent in that regard. And of course, there are lots of advancements in areas of agriculture and so on and so forth that the government is looking to sell. And then there's our low-hanging fruit, like tourism. South Africa is a beautiful country, and our exchange rate is favorable, in terms of foreigners going to South Africa to have a break. I mean, here in Switzerland, we are just dying. Whenever we have a cup of tea, we get shocked. It's like 5 or 6 Swiss francs, which is quite a lot of money. Times that by 13.5, and you get an idea of what we're paying just to have a cup of coffee. So there's a lot going for South Africa, and what Team South Africa was saying is that we have many challenges, and we shouldn't be shy about our challenges, but we should get our heads together in order to try and get solutions to those problems. And one of the reasons that we come to places like WEF is to have international partnerships, because ultimately we live in a global village and we can't do it on our own.
Earlier on, you spoke a little bit about what Christine Lagarde put on the table, particularly around gender. But I know that some of the big themes of WEF are globalisation and technology, inequality. And I just wonder what views are coming through. We know that America and China, for example, are not seeing this globalization story in the same way. But what about emerging nations and the third world countries, for want of a better word, in the developed parts of the world, developing parts of the world? What's their view? What are they saying about this globalization story?
Well, I want to paraphrase, something that Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan said yesterday, and he was saying what's happened in the global sort of arena now is that big countries are sort of taking care of themselves, while smaller countries, middle-income countries like South Africa, and as you go further down, they've had to sort of like wait around as these big countries set the global agenda, which has not been in their favor. And so from that perspective, globalization has been a negative thing because at the end of the day, you've got to rely on the big guys to make the right decisions and to be fair. You talked about the US, you talked about China. There is an opposing view about globalization. China saying that globalization is a positive thing and it can't be blamed for all the ills that there are. What you can blame on the ills is people not working together, and talks and little remarks being made by US President-elect Donald Trump about potentially levying huge tariffs on Chinese goods and so on, and talking about protectionism, speaking against Mexico and so on and so forth. The Chinese president was basically saying that that sort of talk is not going to augur well for going forward, because what's needed is partnership, people working together more rather than moving away from each other and having their own little camps. So I think these are issues that we're going to see what's going to turn out, what's going to happen when Donald Trump comes into office, because he's made lots of promises about what he's going to do on his first day. And, from a person on the outside looking in, it doesn't look good. And I think people are concerned about the US presidency come Friday. They're concerned that it's going to alienate people more than actually bring them together. And at the moment, I think it's just a wait and see. And your smaller countries, really, they're in that position where they have to wait and see, because they don't really have the tools and the nous to make much of a difference. So I think it's a wait and see game, Peter.
All right, Nompu, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for giving us some insights on day 2. And of course, this WEF meeting finishes on Friday, which is the day, of course, that Donald Trump begins his story for the next 4 years. Well, one thing that everybody agrees on is the markets must open and trade. Let's take a look at those now and see how they performed, starting abroad.